Yeah, my name's Paul Devitt. I worked for Google for 10 years now. I'm an information security engineer these days. And I'm going to have a bit of a chat today about like the practicalities of what security looks like at a big company like Google or any of the big tech companies, and probably beyond that. So for me, I studied philosophy at university, and then I also studied psychology. I was at uni for a very long time. It was like 10 years. In 2012, I started in the IT residency program in Google. So it's basically internal tech support, and it's a really good way to get sort of started with these kind of things because it's a broad overview of the company as a whole. That program lasted for 2 years, and then I moved to the Bay Area and spent 4 years there. I went through Google Fiber, the Alphabet transition happened, and I ended up in another bet. I worked on the hardware side of things for a while. I worked on the first Pixel phone for exactly a week, so that was interesting. I then moved and did vendor access restrictions within Google. And these days, for the past 3 years, I've been in the information security engineering team as a product security review lead and vulnerability rewards program panel member. Um, this one here is this is sort of selling on the basis of the vulnerability rewards program. This was me presenting Stadia before it launched to our bug hunters. These were external bug hunters. We were giving them an early access look at Stadia because we encouraged them to sort of find bugs for us, and we'll get more into a bit of that later. Everyone loves a good dog picture. This is my dog Otto, I mainly put this picture in here to explain the profile picture of me lying on him when we were in a park. You saw his bum, so now you can see his face. I'm sure that made your day. Yeah, so I've been a security review tech lead for about a year and a half now, and there's other smaller roles of reviews that I've been working on for the 3 years in ISE. For us, we get over 100 different product security reviews per week. So these are products that are launching externally to Google or internally sometimes when it's internal tooling. And we have to triage and review each and every one of these. The scope and the depth of a review will change depending on a lot of those early triage operations and sort of risk assessments that we have. It's a unique role to exist in. I think it's probably one of the unique ones in the world as a whole, primarily because Google, being Google, is so large that it goes from hardware to web apps to tech frameworks and Project Loon and drones and all that kind of thing. So some of the unique ones that I've seen in my time of doing it is a launch platform for Google Loon. And when I say a launch platform, I mean launching rocket style platform. That was really interesting because you get a technical design doc to look through, and they've got architectural diagrams of how to launch a physical balloon, and they want a security review of it, and which is very fundamentally different from reviewing something that's written in Angular JS or something like that. We've had the Pixel hardware launches. Stadia was obviously a big one, and sort of on the converse side of launching, that you do security reviews of deprecated and shut down products. Things like Google Plus, we oversaw the shutdown of that. At the same time as doing that, I worked on the vulnerability rewards program. So the vulnerability rewards program is where external bug hunters and researchers to Google can report bugs to us, and we help them do that and see the bug through to a fix, and we offer rewards based on the impact and the severity of the bug. There is hundreds of reports that come in a week for that, and so we rotate through. I'll give a lot of details about vulnerability rewards programs and how it works from an insider's perspective, because I think that always helps if you start to report bugs. In 2020, across all of Google, we paid out over $6 million in rewards, and we've got multiple programs, and we'll detail all of those as well. some of the unique bugs that I've seen in my time was we had two bug hunters that were directly chatting to a site reliability engineer through cloud database servers when they found a privilege escalation. They were just leaving notes for each other in text files, which was quite funny. We've seen the google.com cloud organization be taken over. So that was within cloud, everything's nested within an organization. And when you create new projects or launch new instances, it was tied to our bug hunters, google.com, not the real google.com. So that was fun. And as before, we pre-COVID used to do yearly events at the very least with our top bug hunters, where we would fly 20 or sometimes 50 of them to London, and sort of do roundtable sessions, talk about bugs, strategies, and just generally catch up with them. And made some really good friends through our bug hunters. They're an amazing group of people. I'll also be encouraging you all to have a look at the vulnerability rewards program, because we've got a lot of one of our best bug hunters started as a high school student when he was looking at bugs, and he gets paid out quite regularly. He's now working at Facebook, so it was some time ago. But nonetheless, this is one of our events in London. So we combine it with our Capture the Flag, and we also hosted a student event called In at G. In at G was fantastic because we would invite around 100 to 150 students across all of EMEA to come and get some really hands-on experience, some talks from all the different teams that we could muster up to tell them about like how to get involved in security and what to do. At the same time, the CTF's going on, so you've got a whole bunch of ultra experienced hackers just going to town on hard challenges that we've written for them. And then we have our Bug Swat event, which was talking with our bug hunters and that kind of thing. Of particular note is the bottom middle photo, which is I think that might be Alexi sitting in our bomb suit. We had a challenge for one of the CTFs, which is it was a hardware-based challenge. We took inspiration from the game Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, and we built a physical bomb that teams had a limited amount of time to defuse, and it was the standard Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, which is one person in the room in the bomb suit who's doing the physical defusing of the bomb, and their team was in another room on a walkie-talkie radio. And so we played up the drama and the theatrics of it quite a bit. Darkened the room, had a smoke machine in there. We rigged up some large speakers to create a big explosion sound when they failed. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. So these are events to keep an eye on. So yeah, so from there, like the prevailing question becomes like, how do you go from developing a product and making sure it's secure and releasing it? So this is an entire life cycle of a product, or anything that you want to release over the course of time, which is you're going to release something, and there is not a single person on earth that can release a 100% secure program or product beyond Hello World. And like how security is a continuing process. So you have to think of how you want to secure it, or how you want to handle your sensitive assets prior to building it, as you're building it, and after you've built it. So this includes security reviews for companies like Google, all the way through to bug hunting and vulnerability programs. It is reasonable to expect your customers are going to pull it apart, especially the bigger or the more interesting you become. So we'll start at the basis of security reviews. And the hardest thing about doing it at a company of Google's size is that you have basically three competing areas, which is you want to have good threat modeling, a good risk assessment, and you need to manage the time of your security engineers and your reviewers. So the unfortunate part about most security reviews and most security work that is done within tech companies these days is that it's done at the wrong place in time. we get a launch, it's usually a couple of months out from a product launch, and like they want a security review to see that they are secure and what they should or shouldn't change. But the best place in time always to get security done well is at design time. This is before architectural choices are made. This is before platform choices and language choices are made. These all have deep, long lasting impacts. When you get a security review that's a month away from the public launch time or the beta launch time or anything like that, it's a lot harder to make those fundamental design choices change. You've chosen the wrong framework, or you've chosen one that's we don't have great knowledge on. This becomes very difficult to really provide a holistic like view of what your risk is and what security can provide for you. So for us, as I said before, we get over 100 reviews a week, and we roughly across the entire team of ISE that does product security reviews, we have about 100 person hours a week of review capacity. So at this point in time, you're left with decisions that you have to make in your first pass of everything that comes through. So you look at impact and sensitivity, and the overall risk. I'll happily say that, like for the most part, as Google has grown as a company, the ability for us to security review everything has decreased dramatically over time. Now, this doesn't mean we're launching insecure products. It's quite the contrary. Is what we're doing is we're relying on like more secure choices and empowering product teams and end users to make good choices about the defaults that they use or the frameworks or the language choices that they make. So we make it very clear where we're spending a lot of time. For any large scale security effort, you want to get to a point where, like, if the company is growing or your organization is growing, that amount of work will outstrip your person hours like quite significantly, very quickly, and you'll need to get to a point where it is more advantageous to be proactive about your approach, and that is that you want platforms to be secure. So this becomes the trade-off, and like it's an ongoing process. It's something that's never really fully complete. So you're working at it all the time. We have been in mid transition from this late stage security review to early stage design consultation for as long as I can remember, and I don't think that that's ever going to stop. Especially when you get the nature of a company that is that big. Um, so it becomes hard. Um, in the end, if you're reviewing at the end of a life cycle and you're looking for security problems, you end up with situations like this. It's security in the least sense of the term. It might look the part, and you're really relying on probability of impact and risk and the eventuality that like you have a malicious bug hunter versus one that's favorable to what you're doing. So threat modeling is a very hard concept, and this is something that throughout your security life and career, like you're constantly retooling this in your own head, and you also come to the realization that the vast majority of people don't and shouldn't necessarily have a good concept of what threat modeling is. At the simple highest terms, like it's your risk is the likelihood of something happening multiplied by its impact, and it's really simplistic and it's very reductionist. At the end of the day, there is also that older view of security by obscurity doesn't work, but you know it kind of does. Like it doesn't mean that you're secure; it just means no one's looking at you, right? It's not something you want to rely on because, as we've seen over the course of the internet, small things can become big things real quick. So that base equation of risk equaling likelihood multiplied by impact is probably something that, like, if I could spread one message of threat modeling to everyone everywhere, it would be this. It's simple enough that it's easy to understand, and you can build upon that to sort of talk about mitigations of reducing the likelihood and reducing the impact. And this gets into the weeds of like make it more difficult for attackers to attack your system, or reduce the impact of a vulnerable system. Sandboxing and these kind of things help. And so, to concrete that down, it's the concept of looking at the assets that you have, and looking at what it is that's important across a product. So whether it's user data, or it's financial transactions, whether it's video game related, and just the simple concept of piracy and that kind of thing, or Netflix and that. Which leads to interesting sort of conversations as well. And the higher the desirability of that sort of information or asset, the higher the likelihood and the greater the impact at the same time. So looking at things that you can do to reduce that is obviously going to be the case. It's important to know that, like, in the process of doing security, in the process of making things more secure, you are never going to ever get to a point of having a completely secure system. You are never going to be able to say it is 100% foolproof, because the second you say that, someone will come along just to prove you wrong on that basis alone. Anecdotally, I did a Google blog post a couple of years back, and it was around the Google On Hub, which was, we were building a router. It transformed into Google Wi-Fi. And we were talking about, it was the early days of wireless mesh networking, and we wanted to sort of promote the technical aspect that we'd done to secure the mesh key exchanges, and at the same time sort of spruik and advertise the device as well. One of our folks from marketing helped me out with a lot of the language, and like, I was reviewing a draft, and they put in this phrase like, the Google On Hub is an unhackable device. And I remember highlighting it and leaving a comment on the doc that said, this sentence has to go if it doesn't take my name off this blog post, because they were very adamant that they wanted to say this. And like, I absolutely, as a security engineer, didn't want to be caught saying something was unhackable, to wake up approximately 72 hours later or something like that, and see that the device had been owned by someone just looking at it. So the desire of security at the end of the day is to make it more expensive and less valuable for an attacker to go after your system. You're never going to beat anyone outright. Is for as much funding as you put in to secure your products, to secure your services, there is someone who is willing to spend time and effort to make that happen. And that goes worse when you're talking about nation state actors. It goes worse when you're talking about companies that are incentivized to look at your stuff. And especially when you have an asset pool that is something like Google, there are very real threats that you have to consider. So how do you review a product? Ultimately, there is no answer. This was a picture of one of the very first security reviews I ever did. This was at the very start of my security career. Basically, what happened was, I got started on a security team with one of the former heads of Android security. He's a really great guy, and he was mentoring me through it all. And in my first week, all excited and jittery and nervous as they come, I sit down. It's okay. What am I going to be doing? I really don't know how to start. This is a common problem in security. How do you start? And he takes me into a lab room that we had in the building we were at, and what you see in front of you right now are the bits and pieces of a Google Loon device. Not all of it. Off to the right is this big metal frame and a whole lot of aluminium foil and coverings over it. But this was a Loon, and he takes me and says, this is a Loon. Pull it apart and tell me something interesting. And he leaves the room. And so I sat there as the fresh-faced newbie to security that I was, with all these things in front of me, and panicked for the better part of 2 hours. There might have been a rather emotional breakdown on the phone to my wife. I had no idea what to do. And in the end, you sort of eventually get to a point where you just have to do something. So you just start unscrewing things, pulling it apart, taking photos, and looking at what it has you have in front of you. And at the end, it was just a basic parts enumeration, and it was looking at all the different chipsets that we used, all the different components and pieces, how they might have interacted. Um, this one was particularly bad because, again, being sort of new, I didn't map out what I pulled apart and how it was all interconnected, so I couldn't put it back together. Um, that's common. And after I did all that, you start to learn and you start to build a bit about what it is that's going on. One thing I discovered, so this was in when I was in the Bay Area in Mountain View, which is, if you've ever looked at Mountain View and where Google is, it's next door to Moffett Airfield, which is a military airfield. Um, there is, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but on the right, there is a little gold and black device. And the only thing I got told after I did my parts enumeration, the next thing was like, okay, start plugging things in and exploring them. Try to get onto the device, try and get a shell or read something from an output somewhere, anything really. The only thing I got told is do not plug this black and gold device in because it is an aircraft transponder. And the problem with that being is that Moffett Airfield would happily see a low-level aircraft transponder turning on in this building in Mountain View and probably would scramble some form of response. So it was like, this is the only thing you cannot touch. So that device became scary for me, and I didn't touch it, and I put it as far away from me as humanly possible. So the broader concept here is that, like, to review things from a security standpoint, there is no methodology, there is no framework, there is no best practice to do it. At the end of the day, you're going to have security engineers, you're going to become security engineers that, for lack of a better term, are kicking over rocks and looking to see what's interesting underneath. There's going to be commonalities. There's going to be people that have certain tricks and certain skills that you can learn from and that you can build upon. But there is no universally accepted result, and it is really just a matter of having an inquisitive sense of, I want to learn what this thing does. And from that, you can build upon it and build up from there. As you find yourself going deeper and deeper into the review world, like, you'll find a lot more of those commonalities. There'll always be that sense of, like, here are good things to start, but it really can branch out in literally any direction you want to go. So for some people, that's a really fantastic answer of how to do security. For others, like myself, that's kind of nightmarish at times, because it's, how do you know you're doing something right? Well, you don't. And at the end of the day, that's why you build a more holistic security program to encompass, like, multiple different points of view and multiple different ways of attacking a problem. So security doesn't operate as a lone entity, especially when you get to large companies like Google. And it's a matter of, you can always find problems with everything that's going to be released, but understanding that, like, you'll have to pick those battles. So it's the case of understanding, and that's where understanding the assets that you're looking to protect and the ability to make reasonable changes to them. So this is where it relates back to our threat modeling, and it's the idea of, like, yes, this, a an XSRF in a educational content management system website may be a problem, but is it really a big problem? What does an attacker get by attacking these kind of systems? And, like, trolling people is fun and all of that, but, like, if there's nothing really incentivizing the attacker to launch an attack, they probably won't do it at a large scale. Um, Students in classrooms are a bit different. They've got time to mess with one another. So classroom products are their own kind of vector again. But other products, and they're all going to be, trolling type attacks will happen in a classroom, a Google Classroom setup. They're also a big problem for, online gaming and that kind of thing, but they're probably not a big problem for, Google Drive or Keep. it's just not, or G Suite enterprise products. This probably wouldn't happen. Sorry, workspace enterprise products. Naming's difficult. Perfection's impossible in the security world, and nothing is ever finished complete. So the state of the art, as far as I believe, in terms of security, is the video game world. There is a direct correlation between a console manufacturer's position and security posture and their bottom line. If a console gets hacked and can run arbitrary code, that usually means that it's going to be pirated games very quickly. So Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, and everyone like that are heavily incentivized to make sure that their consoles that they release are state of the art in terms of security. And there's a lot of proof in this instance, both in terms of looking at super secure consoles and ones that weren't. So the classic example is always going to be the PlayStation Portable, which was the first handheld to try and compete with the Nintendo Game Boy. And this was at a very early stage of sort of like internet security and device security as a whole. And it wasn't secure at all. Code execution was very easy to achieve on that device. And consequently, it was a great device for people to have, because I could run anything on it. I could run emulators from every console generation prior. I could run any game that I could find an ISO on the internet for it. It was great. It was terrible for Sony, and it was terrible for the publishers, because at the end of the day, they lost faith in the system and they stopped publishing for it. This had a run-on effect for Sony as well. In the PlayStation Vita. The PlayStation Vita has been described as like one of the most secure consoles that has ever been built. And like, if you take a look at the first link, this is from Chaos Communications Congress, number 35. That's Yifan Liu and another gentleman whose name I've forgotten, presenting about the state of the art for the PlayStation Vita. And their description of it is wild, and it's amazing. Like, this is a console that they invested a fantastic amount of time in securing. It was a console that took the PlayStation Vita hacking scene an incredibly long time to get it completely owned. I think even post that talk, there was still a low-level read-only secure element that they could not peek inside of. And I think only very recently that's happened. The second link there is explaining the state of the Vita in just a blog form. It's a great read. And the third link there is something that happened within the last week, and this was dumping the Nintendo Switch's boot ROM keys. And again, these all lead to arbitrary code execution, homebrew, and inevitably at some point in time piracy. So, and to re-emphasize back on the point of the PlayStation Vita, like, it's not really what anyone would describe as a fantastically successful handheld console. It seems pretty unlikely at this point in time that Sony's ever going to go back to the portable console world, primarily because the faith and the trust in the platform was so shaken when it came to the PlayStation Portable that developers were very, very reluctant to develop for the Vita. And the Vita was a fantastic machine. So these are ongoing problems. And even for a company like Sony, like Microsoft or Nintendo, who are directly incentivized, the state of their hardware security is directly related to whether that console is a success or a failure. They still can't get it entirely correct, and they never will. This is not necessarily a failing on their part. It's just the nature of complex systems, hardware, and the determination of hackers everywhere. So I'd encourage, if you're interested in that kind of thing and you want a good snapshot of what good product security looks like, what great product security looks like, dive into these kind of worlds to have a look at what's going on. Even just reading the articles at a high level gives you a sense of some amazing work that's being done on both the defense and the offense side of things. There's a lot of, for lack of a better term, Fortune 500 companies that could only aspire to the level of security that these companies are reaching right now. And it's a different threat model. Again, the hacker, the end user, is directly incentivized by the concept of free games to make this thing happen. So pre and post launch security is what we're talking about at that point. So we've covered a lot of the review world and sort of what you can do or how you would at a high level approach security before you've launched a product. But it's not completely that. At the end of the day, your product is out there, it becomes a living entity of its own description, and you're still going to need to care and feed that entity. So you're looking at post-launch security, and this includes a lot of like proactive reviews and design changes and just platform enhancements and upgrades and that kind of thing. But the other big part about that, and this is no surprise to anyone, is vulnerability rewards programs. So vulnerability rewards programs at a high level allow researchers to submit bugs that they've found to get them fixed, and you can give them a reward. That's again a pretty reductionist view of a VRP from the point of view of actual security researchers who are keenly invested in the idea of security. What a vulnerability reward program provides an individual researcher more than anything is a clear set of rules and guidelines about how a report to a company about a vulnerability will be viewed. There is a extensively long history of just bad responses to bugs being reported to vendors. The Pony Awards has the lamest vendor response that is every year, usually something fantastically dumb, whether it's a Bitcoin wallet insisting that there was no vulnerability despite the keys leaking all over the place, whether it's a state government saying that inspecting the source of their own web page is illegal and hacking because you're looking at source code. That one was wonderful. Or even my own university that I went to. I worked for them at one stage and happily remembered that someone emailed our IT support desk to say that there was a vulnerability in the Exchange server, and like here was a couple of emails to show that anyone could view the email. Uh, my university opted to send lawyers after them, and cease and desists. These are all terrible, terrible ways to do it. Because at the end of the day, even if the security researcher is looking for a reward or a payout, like as long as they're not actively extorting or blackmailing you, like they're helping you improve the security of your product. So, for security bug reports that come in from an external party, what has to happen is that an entity, and this is a hard thing to believe, but an entity like Google has to give up control. We don't own the bug report, we don't own the vulnerability, and we don't own the research. We have no control over it, of any aspect of it, except for fixing the problem. Disclosure, publication, and talks are completely in the realm of the researcher. They can decide that they want to disclose tomorrow if they want to, having reported today, or they can decide to not disclose at all or anything in between. Similarly, they can talk about it wherever they want. And we have to encourage this. This isn't a matter of choice. It's this whole thing. If you want to incentivize more researchers to come in and do more, then we're going to have to understand that they own their work. And that's a completely reasonable thing to say. It's a hard thing to try and sell certain people on. It's a hard thing to try and sell companies that, like, that a bug report that comes in from someone external is not yours and they can do whatever they want, because the alternative is always true, which is they didn't have to report it to you and they could just drop it as a text file on Pastebin, and you're facing a 0 day at that point. So you have to be welcoming, you have to be encourage them, you have to provide basically an assurance and a guarantee that you're working for them, and not the other way around. So how does that translate down the stack though? Product teams aren't always necessarily aligned on that, and this is a common thing that you'll see across a lot of the bad vendor responses, which is software engineering teams and product teams that have designed a product do feel very attached to their product, and the concept of being pointed of someone pointing out bugs and vulnerabilities, like, yeah, it can feel like a personal attack to them that they didn't do a good job and that they didn't do well. So, like, they respond in kind, and it can become very emotional very quickly, and that's before you get to the concept of the security researcher and the product team generally don't see eye to eye on like, hey, the problem should just be fixed to make your product better. And the product team, sees it as you're telling the world that my product has a problem and how dare you. So, what's the answer here? Well, where you can at a large company, especially like Google, we exist as security engineers and we exist as a wedge between the security researcher and the product team. We rarely ever allow the two to talk directly to one another just because of that gross misalignment that can happen. And we've seen in the instances that it has happened, we've seen some pretty horrible things take place. That's not to say that it never happens, but it's you want to be a facilitator for a decent conversation that's happening, and you want to be assured that both sides are at least talking along the same wavelength. You act as a translation service between the two because the researcher will talk one very particular language to you that usually makes an assumption about your threat models, your weaknesses, and the overall impact. And the product team will talk likelihood of normal users. And this is a common thing across a lot of product teams where they will only talk about what a user should do as opposed to what attackers will do. So, excuse me. So that's a hard place to occupy, and it seems counterintuitive both from a researcher point of view and from a product team point of view that you want to insert a middle man like myself in there to keep them as far away from each other as possible. That's not always going to be true across the board with every vulnerability program that exists out there, but I believe that it's something to aspire to, primarily because you need that translation service and you need that understanding of how a product team does work versus how a security researcher believes that it should work, and like both just don't understand each other. So it becomes a matter of you triage, prioritize, fix, and remediate. So researchers are finding problems that exist in products that don't exist within things that you're probably unlikely to find within security reviews, especially if you take a long-standing product like, let's say, Gmail. They're constantly iterating and making new features that come through us for security review, and you're focused on the feature itself. And oftentimes, it's a matter of not seeing the forest from the trees. So you will focus on the feature, but the interaction of other features within Gmail are not necessarily focused on. And like that's the kind of thing that a good VRP program brings to the table more than anything else. They can indicate longer term or more foundational problems. So this is the kind of thing of where you see like cross-site scripting happening on the same product in different forms all across the place. Well, I mean, that's pretty clear that their sanitization as a whole just isn't working. And that you may have to spend a longer effort and time to remediate the problem as a whole. You can hot fix every report that comes in and you can pay out for every report. And trust me, we love paying out for every report that comes in. We want to do that more than anything else. But at the end of the day, like, your hole has thousands of boats. Your hole has thousands of boats. Easy for me to say. Your boat has thousands of holes in it. And at a certain point in time, like, just rebuild the boat. That's a terrible analogy, but I committed to it when I messed up saying it. So the vulnerability rewards program can lead to patterns, trends. It can help you with analysis and counting problems and that kind of thing. So you get a more holistic view of everything that's going on and what turns out to be sort of fundamental problems with your launch and design processes. The other side of vulnerability rewards program is, and this is where it comes into understanding how vulnerability rewards programs work. If you ever read any article on the internet that talks about, like, most recently, obviously, Apple launched their vulnerability rewards program, and they got a lot of flack, deserved in some instances and a bit harsh in others, about poor response times. Now, it's unfortunate that it all happened the way it did. Like, Apple's response time on a lot of those bugs was pretty bad, but it's a new program and it's just, sadly, it's teething problems, and that's how it'll be. All VRP programs worldwide are receiving at least 75% reports of all the reports they receive are complete junk. They're not a security vulnerability. They're not a bug. It's an opinion. is wildly nonsensical. It is testing, or it has no impact, or it's wildly impractical. There's not a good understanding of what it is they're reporting. This is the very literal trying to find a needle in a haystack on a given batch of vulnerability reports. Half the time they're just not. We have had reports that have been I reporting that copy and paste features within Gmail was information leaking because it put it in the clipboard. And like, that seems kind of ridiculous, but like, I'm trying to think of other ones right now, but they're not coming to my head. I'll come back to that if I think of something. Triage of fatigue is absolutely a thing. Within Google, the vulnerability rewards program is staffed on a rotational basis by pretty senior security engineers. You're not talking to customer service individuals. You're not talking to people who don't understand security. You're talking to people who, when they finish their week of doing triage and report responding, go back to building secure frameworks and reviewing products and red teaming the company as a whole. They are long tenured, for lack of a better way, highly paid security engineers. This isn't the case at every company. It's not always particularly clear. It's something we believe is quite unique to us, and something our bug hunters have told us is very valuable. There is always an assumption from new bug hunters. The amount of times I have been told by a bug hunter, forward this onto a real security engineer. Thanks for that. Always love those kind of things. Researchers can get they're attached to their reports. They can get pretty emotional pretty quickly, and frustration is a big concept of what they do. You spend forever looking at a bug report only to be told it's a duplicate, and we're not going to tell you what it's a duplicate of because there's privacy implications. That's pretty frustrating, and I can completely understand where they come from. It's a give and a take at the end of the day. An understanding, I think, when I see a lot of news articles about vulnerability rewards program, and you read the comments, don't read the comments, but you do read the comments. The thing that strikes me is the vast majority of people who are on those comment threads saying how a vulnerability rewards program works have clearly never submitted anything to a vulnerability rewards program, because it's just so wildly detached from how reporting a security bug would go that they're just making it up. This is whether it's you're reading on Ars Technica or whether you're reading on Reddit or Hacker News or anywhere that it comes up, it is always the same. People are very quick to offer an opinion about something that they have had no experience with. And I have never seen on any of those threads or those comment threads people that I could recognize as our top bug hunters or other companies' top bug hunters. That industry of VRP as a career, of vulnerability rewards program as a career, and this is some people that have made like well over what I would hope to make in a year, just through VRP reports. They keep to themselves for the most part. They know how to do the whole thing. Trying to encourage them to blog more about their findings and their research, but they like to keep to themselves, that's for sure. Making good reports. So I'm going to encourage you to, if you want to get involved in vulnerability rewards program, it is a great way to supplement any income while you're studying or while you're doing anything else. It can be as simple as having an XSS payload that you routinely put in every text dialog box you come across. You'll have hits at some point in time. It'll work. Be concise, be direct. Within our program, we encourage our researchers to argue with us. We are not definitive. We are not correct all the time, and we are not the oracle of all information within Google. I have learned more about Google products from external researchers than I would sitting down and looking at documentation and code ever. Unfortunately, you have to be prepared to accept defeat, and you also have to be prepared to wait because there's a lot going on. But we really do encourage the show us where we're wrong. Triage is triage when it comes to these kind of reports, and you're inevitably going to generalize and gloss over a certain degree of the report, and you may miss a key feature as a triage. I do this all the time. On a given week of doing triage, I'm more wrong than I am right. So like the good thing is our researchers feel empowered to argue. So I encourage you to have a look at our bughunters.google.com. It details the program. We've got multiple different programs within Google. It's a good way to get started, just to sort of poke around and do things. The rules of the program are quite sort of clear, which is you're authorized to test on anything that you can identify as Google, as long as it's not, damaging to the service or others. If you find a denial of service,
Is he gone? Oh, he's gone. That's kind of... he's back. He's muted though. Paul, you're muted and we cannot see your screen. Yeah.
Sorry, did I drop out? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Sorry.
No problem.
My bar disappeared and everything, so something dropped out entirely. The good thing is I'm almost done.
That's a perfect timing with your denial of service and then dropping out. Also, you're muted again. I think it's a Zoom thing with the browser. If you start sharing,
Zoom audio and mutes my microphone. Anyway, that's amazing that it dropped out on the denial of service. That's so cool. Totally unintentional. Yeah, at this point, I'm going to stop talking, and I believe there's questions or anything like that. I can answer as many or as little as there are.
Hey, thank you. Thanks a lot for that great presentation and the talk. It was like really interesting to learn about your life and how it's like to be a security engineer, and especially about the vulnerability program. So before we start with the Q&A, I would like to highlight one particular question about the slides. So one person asked if there will be slides available after the session. And what about you, Paul? What do you think? Will you share?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all yours. There's nothing in there that's problematic at all. There's a couple of links that's worthwhile having a look. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. So we will publish them after the event. And now let's start with the Q&A. So you guys can speak up right now. Just talk to Paul, or if you don't want, I will just go on to the Slido questions. Okay, so if there's nobody coming up, I can just start with the Slido questions, and I think we will start with the most upvoted one. It is kind of like a technical question. Okay, so Paul, do most people in your team come from security or threat modeling background, or can you also come from like a software engineering background?
Yeah, so I'm going to preface this question with like, they're all going to be good questions, so thank you. I'm not going to say that all the time. Within my team, there's I'm a security engineer by job title. It's 75% software engineers versus 25% security engineers by job title. The reality of the situation is that there's no functional difference between any of us in that sense. I do as much software engineering as I do security engineering, and some of our software engineers haven't written a line of code for 3 years plus. What ultimately is the case is that there's a security interest more than anything else, or a desire to learn that. We've picked up SREs, we've picked up technical account managers, we've picked up IT support people as well. So yeah, all backgrounds, all types.
So that basically means you can just jump over to security engineering if you would like to.
Pretty much, yeah. Look, that's always that's a larger task than it makes it seem to be. Like, you'll ask 10 different people, what does it take to get into security? And they'll inevitably respond with some form of just start doing it, which is like great and horrible. When I was first starting out, I hated that as an answer. But it really is the case of like, there is no one singular way of doing anything, and just being interested and looking at things. And look, you're never going to escape the fact that, like, if you find a mentor and someone that wants to teach you and take you under their wing, that's a huge boost. That's a massive boost. That's not an easy thing to do, but like the other side is you can just start looking at things. You can start doing CTF war games online. You can start getting involved with beginners quest. You can start taking apart your Nintendo Switch. You can do anything and it'll get you there in some way, shape, or form.
Sounds really cool. So let's go on to the second question, which is actually about the methodology. I think you pronounce it like that.
Yep.
So you mentioned that you don't usually have steps or like one methodology that you follow if you review something. So what do you actually do in this case?
There's the problem with having a sort of step-by-step methodology is that, like, you'll quickly find yourself off course really quickly. And so you can have sort of guidelines and you can have things that, like, oh, we've seen stuff like this before, or we've seen things that are roughly similar. So you can follow a guide up until a certain point, but like the guide is probably going to be written in the sense of something that already exists, and you're probably not reviewing what already exists. I mean, look, I know Google duplicates effort quite a lot of times and we launch the same product twice, but like, yeah, you try not to. The reality of the situation is that you want someone to get orientated on a given product or a given service, framework, application as quickly as you can. But that methodology quickly sort of gives way of when you're taking large complex systems basically and you're interlocking them and you're interjoining them. So you could review something that is, you know, a React framework front end application, but you can read about React if you want, but at some point in time it's going to be doing, you know, back end service calls to something completely new and different, and whatever you write there is not going to be complete. So the methodologies and those process guides can help. We've got a lot of them. I'll admit that, but they help to a certain point, and that certain point is really not too deep.
To me, it just sounds like, you know, like the normal bug searching thing you do in software engineering, usually like on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's all it is at the end of the day. Like, if you can find bugs of where it just isn't working, you can find security bugs.
That's really cool. So actually, it's cool to see the similarities between two of those topics. So I have a next question for you. This is also like more on the technical side. And it's about which skills are required in your job, like which technical skills, which soft skills, and what is the type of task you do the most during the week?
Man, that's a hard question. So technical skills, I started out as hardware security. I haven't done it in a very long time. I want to get back into it, but the vast majority of stuff that comes through our vulnerability rewards program is web-based. I had no background in web before I started, so I learned. And you learn, you know, trial by fire, right? Like, it's you get a report, you read, you look at previous reports, and you learn as you go along. I'm not great at it. I'll happily say that, but I know more than I did 4 years ago. The technical skills can be sort of anything at the end of the day. You know, deep programming language knowledge is great at some point in time, especially with sort of your big tech companies and Google especially. All roads are going to lead to coding. So you know, having that base level coding knowledge is always a plus. At the same time, we've got folks here who specialize in incident response and forensics. They probably haven't touched code in a very long time. We've got folks who endlessly spend their time looking at file formats and things like hash collisions and that kind of thing. There's no any technical skill you can think of has security implications. So all of them, some of them, none of them, like it's all good. Any mixture of that. Soft skills wise, for the kind of thing that I do, this is going to be true with everything. Communication is key. At the end of the day, the better your ability to talk across different domains and be flexible to different domains, the better it works at the for everybody. As a complete aside, two of the other soft skills or technical skills, depending on how it is you want to go with it, that I've used while I've been in this role was script writing and filmmaking, because that's something I did while I was a security engineer. Yeah, we make dumb movies. Like, they are really schlock and bad, and thank God they're internal. I think one's becoming external, and it's going to be like the most embarrassing thing you'll ever see. It's just terrible. But like, the reason I bring that up is because it's like everything at the end of the day. Like I said, when I studied philosophy. My technical background is blowing up my own computer at home, and that's kind of it, right? Like, yeah. And that's a lot of people as well in security as well. The amount of people you run into, it's where it's like, oh, they have no formal education in it. And equally, there's a ton of people that do have formal education. So I don't want to like say one is better than the other, because there is no better. There's just different ways.
Okay, I see. So you just need to develop yourself in a lot of different areas. And that actually goes for like almost every job, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's, gravitate to what you're interested in doing. Is always the winner. That's what I did, and it worked out. It might have been sheer dumb luck at some points, but that's what happened.
Sounds great. So there's actually one question that kind of matches the soft skill thing that you were talking about. So do you actually need to do social engineering during your work?
No, not particularly. We make the general assumption. So Google has red teams and orange teams that attack Google for making those assumptions. The reality of it is that social engineering is known to work. It just always works, and so it's a given assumption that attacks that are predicated on the basis of social engineering will just work. Within the vulnerability rewards program, we actually knock back reports that are dependent on social engineering as a major factor in the attack the attack scenario that they're describing. Primarily because, to put it very bluntly, this applies to myself as well. You can always find someone dumb enough to click a link. And that includes security engineers. We're some of the worst. Like, there's that view that we're invulnerable to it because we study it. Oh no, I have done some of the dopiest things you could imagine. I've got a document internally, which is it's called "Shit Paul Dev Does with His Password," because of dumb things I've done with my account password. Like, and I'm talking really dumb things. But yeah, it's social engineering is fun. It's a lot of fun, and like, because there's performance and charisma and theatrics associated with it, you feel kind of really, really badass when you do it well. But it's always just a function of how good of an actor is someone, right? So I'd encourage to look into it. Social engineering villages at security conferences are great fun. Definitely do it. It's not a requirement though. Yeah.
Talking about requirements, so one person just asked a question. Do you think that getting a degree in computer science has any disadvantages compared to a degree in cybersecurity when you want to work in security?
So this might be showing my age a little, but at the time that I grew up and went through university, the concept of cybersecurity as a degree was not really well done, or done anywhere, to be perfectly honest. I think generally speaking, I would probably err on the side of computer science is better than a more specialized cybersecurity degree. For the simple reason of the ones that I have seen, I've since done a master's like in recent years in information security, and it was to categorize it horribly, it was a fantastic waste of time. So it was too general. It was too management style, like, here's how you manage, within OWASP frameworks and things like this, and it never got into the details and the weeds and the technical details. So I would. That's a huge generalization to all cybersecurity programs. I don't know, and I don't want to say. So I'd say approach with caution, because it's too new and it's very untested and unproven in the broader context of the world. I have no doubt that they're getting better, and universities and teachers are doing a lot to make them better, but I don't know if they're there yet. Computer science is a lot more older of an educational tradition in that sense, and it's more rigorous. It produces results at the end of the day. Opinions of a madman.
Sounds, but still, it just sounds interesting. Like the next question is like more about your working day. So you mentioned that you can get up to 100 reviews a week. And you mentioned that it also takes like 100 plus hours to like review all of them. And can it happen that you overwork? And does Google somehow compensate the overworking hours?
So within ISE, we're a very old team within Google, and we have a lot of that very early stage Google culture built into us, which is great. So we're empowered to do to manage our time accordingly. So for the 100 plus reviews, 100 hours, like it's the 100 collective person hours across the entire team. So like that's our capacity, that when we're triaging and we're encouraging other people to take reviews. We don't force anyone to take a review. We just really butter them up and come on, you'll do this for me. We have a capacity. So we have a newsletter that we send out at the end of the week, which is advertising all the reviews that we think are sensitive enough to warrant individual review. And that has a capacity limit of about 100 person hours, working hours a week. In terms of individual sort of work and burnout, yeah, that's a big concern, obviously, and that's a big concern for the entire company. It's gotten only bigger as COVID has happened. We are heavily incentivized. We are constantly reminded by managers and executive and leadership to manage our time properly, to disconnect, break off, stop working, all of that kind of thing. The vast majority of everyone that I know block books out areas in their calendar: do not schedule, do not disturb, focus time, that kind of thing. There's no expectation that people will or won't respond to pings or emails at any given time. Like if something requires that level of immediate attention, it's classified as an on-call service, which is someone is scheduled to do it, they are expected to do it. So you can page an on-call for a problem or something like that. But as far as your average day-to-day security reviewer or security engineer goes, and really should apply across the rest of the company, and I think it does for the most part, you manage your own time, and it's completely okay to be not available. COVID presented unique problems, parents with kids, people who were moving countries, all of that kind of thing. Even the simple thing of, I want to walk the dog. And I don't want to spend the whole time talking to someone on my phone. I hate typing on my phone. So I just mark it as do not disturb, and it's fine. They can, I'll get to it when I get back.
So yeah, time management is certainly a skill that I also need to master.
I don't think I'm good at it either, but like I guard it a little more fiercely these days, and I feel okay doing that.
Well, that's great that you feel okay. So the next question is again like more of a technical one. How do security reviews on an implemented or a finished product and penetration testing differ?
So for the most part, your penetration testing will largely be black box focused. So that is that you're going into it without necessarily code access or anything like that. In most cases, you either give it to an orange team or a red team. The difference between a red team is a dedicated team of security engineers. An orange team is Googlers who are interested in hacking things, so they can sign up even if their background is like cloud sales. But they can sign up and be a part of a team. And that's a good way to get sort of introduction into these kind of things. But your penetration test will focus it on the basis of an end user's view of the system, which is, you know, a front end that's presented, no privileged access, no docs, no source code access or anything like that. Your implementation security review will probably look, will probably look more along the lines of what frameworks have been chosen, what platforms have been chosen, how they interact, what your ACL models look like, what any identity aware management looks like, remote procedure calls and how they're done and that kind of thing. And it'll happily use all of that technical design doc, privacy review documentation, and code access to work that out. You will request an account in a staging instance that's privileged to try and do things or to look at things. So I guess at a broad level, privileged versus unprivileged.
Do you actually like also have pen testers at Google?
Yes. Yeah. So there is the offensive security team. We also, for certain products, we'll also pass it on to external companies that specialize in pen testing as well. Variety is the spice of life, I guess, and it's the different, you know, you don't want to run the risk of the same types of people looking for the same types of problems. You know, working within Google, you get very particular about like things, and often, you know, if this will come as a shock to no one, but you know, Googlers can lose track of the wider world and what's going on in the wider world. So it's great to have that perspective of other folks who aren't us at the end of the day.
Oh, I think that's always the problem. I mean, even if you're searching for a bug, it's always good to have a fresh view on your problem.
Right.
To find it.
And that's why like CTF teams that are great at what they do are big teams of people with like unique views and specializations. Yeah, it's exactly that.
Do you actually know if FANG companies, if they are as competitive to get into for security engineers as they are for software engineers?
I don't know. I sideloaded into security, right? And my general view for a lot of FANG companies and that kind of stuff is that, especially if you're starting out in your career, that sideloading option is like really, really powerful. And there's a number of different ways to do that. There's always sort of graduate and associate level programs. There's the IT residency program within Google. And then like if you're later on in your career, there's temp and vendoring. So we hire for temp roles and all of that. And like theoretically, it's not supposed to influence hiring, but like you can't help it, right? If you work as a temp worker here, you get a certain degree of an insight that you wouldn't get otherwise. The answer as it relates to FANG companies and how competitive it is to get in is determination. Just keep trying. Honestly, like a lot of those hiring processes are based on, like, not explicitly, they don't go out of their way to do this, but it's based on the idea that the drop-off rate of after not getting one job is really huge. But I don't know anybody who worked here who got a job their first time that they applied. It just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certain know that. And also, what is the salary expectation for a security engineer? We just got that question. I hope it's not a secret.
$1 million plus stock. No, it depends on your level, of course. And it depends on your location. That's a bit of a controversial statement at the moment, especially given sort of COVID and remote work and everything. I suspect that'll change in years to come. I don't know what it would look like starting out as a security engineer. Yeah, I really don't know. I can sort of speak to it depends on the company and where you're located. You know, Google does this cost of labor, so it's how much you're likely to get paid at a similar company in the same market. So like, you know, if you're from remote Australia and you manage to get a job there, you're probably paid not fantastically well in comparison to other software engineers. The Bay Area is expensive to live in. Zurich is expensive to live in. And so they want it to be at least commensurate with your ability to live reasonably comfortably. Yeah, that's probably about as specific as I can get.
Okay, no problem.
That's a hard answer. Yeah, that's a hard question.
Still a great answer. Thanks for that. So the next question is, what's your opinion on HackerOne and other bug bounty platforms?
They're fantastic at the end of the day. Anything that pushes bug bounty forward is a winner, especially responsible disclosure. Remembering that a lot of it is going up against zero-day brokers and others who want to get bugs to sell to unknown recipients and withhold it from vendors. The main focus of anything security is about making end users more secure. I have no particular gripes, or there's always going to be individual nuances of people who have bad times with programs like BugCrowd or HackerOne, and I'm sure they're valid. I have no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, anything that pushes that train forward, I'm in full support of, because HackerOne serves the purpose of people who don't want to run a full VRP themselves. It's expensive and it's time consuming. There's no doubt about that. Not every company wants to afford that, and HackerOne stepped in to fill that void. It mightn't be perfect by any means, and there'll be some people out there as researchers that love the HackerOne platform and probably hate the Google VRP platform as much as there are people who love Google VRP and hate HackerOne. No, broadly, fantastic stuff. More of it, please.
We have also another question about bug bounty programs. So what do you think is another good and interesting price for such a program aside from money?
I mean, the vast majority of actual security researchers that we get really do care about the fixes more than anything else. And you get a mixture of different things. So you get people who are focused on the reward, you get people who are focused on the recognition, and you get people who are focused on the fix. And then you get any mixture and all of the above to varying degrees. I think, though, our really top level bug hunters, they get to a point where the rewards are nice, and they keep the train rolling, as it were. They keep them fed and housed and all of that good stuff, which is what you want. But they inevitably develop a passion and a care towards what it is they're doing. They like messing around with the programs. They like messing around with the platforms and doing things. It becomes fun in and of its own right. At the point in time that you're talking to a database SRE through a text file on a virtual machine on a cloud instance, it's cool. It's just fun. So yeah, we see in the mixture of all the things. There's you can be entirely reward incentivized if you want, and that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly reasonable that you want to be paid. It's perfectly reasonable that you want money. Why do you want this job? Because I like eating. That's a good answer. But yeah, anyway.
And about those programs and competitions, we have another question. So you were talking about one competition in the beginning, I think. I can't quite remember which it was, but the person is asking where they can find the sign up.
So I think it was the Google CTF. I hope I'm touching on the right one. So each year we do the Capture the Flag program. If you just Google for Google CTF, it'll be the first result. I think it's capturetheflag.withgoogle.com. It's going through a bit of a change at the moment. So it used to be the case of we had preliminary competition that anybody can join. Of that, the best scoring teams got invited to London to participate in the finals. I think going forward, what is happening is that, again, because COVID, we couldn't host it in London one year, that we use the online finals that we had as a feeder to the next year. So if your goal or your desire is to get to the finals in London, one, find a team. You can't do it on your own very well. There's like one or two people worldwide who are absolutely beyond human ability of being it. We got one employed here, and we always like him to test the CTF challenges because he's one of those like totally off the wall kind of hackers. He can just look at something and it falls apart, and I hate him for it because it's so it's jealousy and raging. I want to be that good. But find a team. Usually most universities I think might have one and things like that, or start a team and get people to do it. You don't have to have experience in it. You just have to sit down and look at things. In the instance that you try it out by yourself, the main CTF may be a little hard. We always do a beginner's quest as well. And we usually have a bit of fun. We do a story alongside it. You'll probably hear my dopey ass voice narrating some aspect of the story at some point. Yeah, that's another soft skill. And yeah, they're always just sort of challenges to try out. So yeah, that capture the flag with google.com. CTFtime.org lists a whole lot of other CTFs that exist in the world. We're not the only ones by far that does this. There's a lot of, they always have prizes, they have trips involved and that kind of thing. And there's probably, I think as part of CTF Time, there's even sort of team recruiting and that kind of thing. So you can find some folks there as well.
Mentioning CTF, our club, DSC Club, will also host a CTF. I don't know when, but I think somewhere next year. So guys, stay tuned for that if you're interested in that topic. Okay, and we have 3 questions left. So one of them is a personal one. So why did you decide to go into security engineering, and what motivates you?
When I started in Google, I was in the ITR program, which was internal tech support. And the hardest question that I think most people will ever face in their life is, what do you want to do on a day-to-day basis? It's people twice my age that still haven't worked that out. And it's a really hard question to answer. As time went on, and the answer when you're faced with that kind of, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I like the concept of Google. I wasn't like attached to it. I was willing to walk away at the end of my time unless I found something that I really gravitated towards. And the answer becomes just try a lot of different things, or I tried a lot of different things. There was sort of program management style things you could do. There was strict software engineering and development work. There was teams that were happy to have sort of more sales and support based work and that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, security team was there, and their stuff was interesting. And I found myself just reading more and looking at more. And then we had some security engineers in Sydney. I kept bugging them relentlessly. They probably hated me. But like every time something has happened, tell me about that. What's going on? And they, people want to help out at the end of the day. Like it's a bit of a stroke to the ego when you've got a freshly graduated student saying, how do you do this? And it's like, oh cool, like come with me and I will show you the way. It feels cool. The answer is that in the absence of not knowing what it is you want to do, just try everything, because at the very least you're going to eliminate the things that you hate. My wife just did exactly this. She's gone through a massive career change. She was an accountant by education and by trade, and she is about to be a election integrity specialist for Google in looking at being stopping misinformation in elections that propagates across the web. So you go from an accountant to being that. That's a massive jump, man, and I'm super proud of her. She's done fantastically well. It's a kind of career change that scares me, and she made it look effortless. But yeah, and in the lead up to that of trying to figure out what it is she wanted to do, she tried a lot of different things, and it really was just striking off things. She's like, nope, finance sucks, accounting sucks, I don't want to do anything money related, I'm sick of it. And it was just striking things off the list until you got to something where you're like, this is kind of cool.
So we can also actually see that you also like your job, like you're working 10 years for Google already. So that's pretty amazing.
Either that or I'm afraid of interviews.
Well, that can be true as well.
Absolutely.
So did you also try to get any certificates regarding security engineering? And if it's, which would you recommend?
None of them. And yes, I did. So like hypocrisy, what a winner. No, so as part of the masters that I referred to doing, part of the program was certain amount of security certificates. I did CISSP and Certified Ethical Hacker. Certified Ethical Hacker was a complete waste of time, for me at the very least. Funny still that about 6 months, 12 months after I did it, they had a database breach and lost all of their stuff. So it's just like, man, this is great. Certificates aren't really required at a deep technical level. You're always going to find jobs in areas that say they want it, because again, security is trying to find something that indicates that you're knowledgeable to a certain level. And I don't think such a like rigorous program or test of someone being good at security exists, because security touches everything in equal measures. You can get away with not doing it. That being said, like, they are good orientators. So it's this whole thing of, it will give you broad overview of security as a whole. And if you can find a way to do one cheaply or for free or something like that, and you're not sure, you want to do something security, but you're not sure which type of security you want to get into, it can help you orient that way. And they're worth it in that sense. As far as deep technical knowledge goes, nah, it's not happening. I think some of the SANS courses in days gone by were deeply technical. I don't know how they are now. At a proper tech company, any of the FANG-based companies, it's not going to be a prerequisite that you have a security cert, because any security engineer of their salt will be like, yeah, but it's not indicative of much. You know, you can have people who have certs, so many certs that the run on acronyms after their names never ends, and they're terrible. And you can have people who are like, yeah, I dropped out when I was in high school. That's the best thing you've ever seen. So use it as as a compass, I would say.
Okay, so we will now ask you the last questions, and then you can finally go and rest. So if two researchers independently find a vulnerability and report to them, do both of them get the full reward? And I think the person who asked the question meant if they find the same vulnerability.
It's first person to report it at the end of the day. If it's so close you can't tell, then we'll pay out. Google reward program, the vulnerability reward programs really wants to pay out people, and so do most VRPs. You know, you'll often see the criticism of like, oh, well, it's just because they don't want to pay out. Like, you know, I made mention earlier of the Apple program, and it's not fantastic launch, and there was a lot of comments of like, oh, they just don't want to pay the money for the bugs. And it's like, if they didn't want to pay the money for the bugs, they wouldn't start the program. Like, that just doesn't even pass the basic sniff test. It's because other things got involved. That's it's a new program, it's teething issues, it's all that kind of thing. So for the same report, discovered independently, if it's close enough together that we can say we didn't know about it before, then both will be paid out. But if it's like, because especially with sort of Google programs, you'll launch a new service, and your researchers will do a run on that service. And so you can stand to get the same bug multiple times in a given week, especially if it's a fresh new thing or anything like that. And so, yeah, it really does come down to the first person to get there at a broad level. The other side of it is like, collaboration is better than duplication. So it's that whole thing of like, we happily encourage and pay out on collaboration, like the two researchers work together or multiple researchers work together. The payouts change a little bit. and I think that detailed on the Bug Hunters page about how the collaboration bonuses and things like that work. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's going to be first come, first serve.
Okay, so that's a really useful information. And I think, yep, that was the last question, and that concludes our event. Thank you a lot for having time today for us and giving that amazing talk. I certainly learned a lot from you, and it was also really motivating. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for everyone attending. Thank you, Maria, and everyone for having me. This is it's great to talk to everyone like this and get questions and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's true. Thanks a lot. So we will send you later a feedback form. So guys, please fill it out so that we can make our events better and cooler. Not that, I mean, this event was already cool and really good. So
get better speakers than me, you know.
No, you were great. You were great. Okay, thanks a lot for attending. And yeah, I think that's the end. And stay tuned for the next weeks because we will be hosting an event every 2 weeks from now on.